Welcome to another episode of the Hoopsfix podcast with me, your host Sam Nita, full-time British basketball advocate. And on this week's show, we have Jackson Gibbons. Jackson heads up the City of London Academy / Southwark Pride program down in South London. I've been a long admirer of his work, not only because of the success that he's had in a relatively short period of time, but actually what's more impressive to me is the culture and the community that he's built around the program. So I thought I have to have him on the show to talk to him about it, which is exactly what we did. Before we do get into the show, I do have to give a quick mention to our Patreon account. If you go to patreon.com/Hoopsfix, that's patreon.com/Hoopsfix. If you support and you value our work and you want to help us become 100% independent and financially sustainable, you can sign up there for as much or as little as you'd like to donate every single month, which goes a long way in helping us do the work that we do, which takes hours upon hours every single week. So we are coming directly to our audience, directly to you, to ask you whether or not you'd be willing to support. So you go to patreon.com/Hoopsfix, you can sign up there. And if you do, I will forever love you. Anyway, that's enough from me. Here's a show with me and Jackson. Of course, if you're listening on iTunes, please do give us a rating and review. And if you want to give me feedback one-on-one, privately, via email, sam@hoopsfix.com, or you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at Hoopsfix. Here is this week's show with me and Jackson Gibbons. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel honoured. Feel like I've arrived almost to do the Hoopsfix podcast. So thank you for having me.
It's been a long time coming. I wanted to have you on the show for a long time. Mm-hmm. Obviously to talk about a lot of the great things that you're doing at Cola. But I think the obvious place to start is actually going back into your playing days, okay, and how you first got into basketball. So let's go right back to the start. Can you talk about how you first got involved with the game?
I actually used to play football. I was a really keen footballer. I remember... it's not one of my first memories, but one of my main memories as a kid was crying at 10 years old at the World Cup 90 when we went out on penalties. And it meant so much to me back then. And I played the sport. I was part of QPR's academy back then. And I used to play, I think it was for Brent. It was for our local borough. And it came through school, and I loved football so much. It was so important to me. But there was a weekend where there was a basketball tournament, and our school went off to play in the basketball tournament. I had a game for Brent, and I went and watched the boys play afterwards. It was at South Kilburn School, a couple of minutes up the road from my house, and my PE teacher was there and stuff like that. And I watched it, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, what we did in school basketball-wise and how the tournament looked were two different things. And so there was another tournament about a month later, and I had the choice to go with Brent, or I had the choice to go, with my school team. And I went, and the tournament was at Mobley. It was hosted by Westminster Warriors Basketball Club, and I proceeded to be the most one-handed player in the gym, left-handed, running around, but very quick and small and agile, and managed to, get through, could get through players. And a gentleman came up to me and said, "You're pretty good." He said, "What do you do?" I said, Nah, I play football. I'm going to make it in football and stuff like that. He said, "Well, just come down and try practice, and you'll see, how we do things and stuff like that." And I was a little bit of a lost kid at the time and needed some direction. And that gentleman was Junior Williams. And he told me to come and try it. And I went down on a Friday, and there was a crazy man there that was running practice. And that crazy man was Steve Alexander. And Steve told me to come to the Saturday session, and I fell in love with it. It was incredible. There were so many, now I look back, iconic figures at the club at the time. Narmo Shiri was there, Julius Joseph, who did the podcast, who, I listened to his podcast, and I remember so many of the things that he was talking about. And I kind of looked at that time and said, football, basketball. And I was like, it's indoors. I used to be a centre forward, so I used to stand up front a lot, especially when we were losing and it was freezing. And I just thought, do you know what? Basketball is me, is something. And it was a good environment for me to be around, because I was a single parent family. There were a lot of strong male role models and male figures in the club, and it was something that I needed at the time, and I gravitated towards it. And it kind of proceeded from there.
So how old were you when that happened?
It was just before my 14th birthday, because I missed playing that season. I didn't get to play my first season. I kind of came partway through the season, and I started playing the following season. So it would have been, showing my age, it would have been the end of 93, start of 94.
So the moment that you made the switch, in your mind, was it like, this is basketball, I'm serious about this now, this is what I want to do? Or did it take a bit of time before it became a thing where it was like, this is really what I want to do?
It was the culture for me. I was never a huge kid, and I think it's grown over the years. I was never a huge kid that necessarily thought I had to go to the States. Like, I had these huge dreams or aspirations. I don't think I loved the NBA and I watched it, but I don't, I had people that I admired, but I don't think I ever thought that was going to be me. I just thought, it's something that I need at the time. Although saying that, I did used to idolize BBL players and want to play in the BBL. I think that was something that, in the mid-90s, it was something to aspire to. I think that young kids used to go to the games, and when I was 14, 15, the older guys at the club used to take me to the games. We'd go to Wembley and watch Towers. We'd go to London Arena and watch guys play, and I used to look up to those guys and really think, like, one day I would love to be in that position, because it was such I think it's getting slowly back to that. We won't go into the BBL. I'm no authority to speak on it, but it was an aspirational thing for me when I was 14, 15. Like, I really wanted to be a part of it.
That's super interesting. So who were the guys in the BBL that you were looking up to?
It's weird, actually. Not really the Americans. I used to look up to the English guys and think, maybe one day I could be like that. So I used to have, some of my heroes are people that I've either played against or I'm still around nowadays. Is probably my favourite players were Andrew Bailey, who works over at Greg City Academy now. And literally, I've never seen a person be able to defend like Bales. He could just wall up and keep people in front, Americans, Europeans, whatever it was. He was just such a competitor, and he was a skilled offensive player as well. And I used to look at him and think, wow, like if I could ever grow up and be like that, that would be, something that was that I would want to do. And then Ronnie Baker, Steroid Baker, they were two players that I really aspired to, because I was a smaller point guard. I could see myself being those guys, and I also liked the leadership qualities. Ronnie and Steady, not quite loud. In fact, all three of them are quite reserved guys, chilled guys, but they were leaders. They put themselves out there, and I always felt at that young age that was something that I could do. And so yeah, they were the guys. And then obviously Steve Bucknell came back to the league around those times. There was quite an influx of young guys, and then we had guys like Drew Sullivan, who was my age. We're the same age, but he was already on the bench in the BBL at like 15 years old. And Robert Sargent, who went off to the States, and DeMajor Stewart was at London, what were they back then? London Leopards, playing over at London Arena. And these guys would be on the end of the bench. And so I would think, okay, like, we're the same age. Maybe, give me 3 or 4 years, I could get there. But, supremely talented guys that maybe I wasn't quite in their class. But it felt like a very aspirational thing for me at the time.
Do you hear any of your kids now talk about wanting to play in the BBL?
Not so much, but I think that with the introduction of the internet and social media and how things are, I think that they look beyond it. And we've got a young man who came to college. He's actually the first ever recruit that we had. Denzel Ubiara went off to junior college, and now is having a really good career with Plymouth Raiders. And I think a lot more kids should look in that direction. I think that UK basketball is, for want of, describing it differently, I guess it's got its issues and it's got its things, areas of growth that we've got. But it's also, there's some fantastic things going on with some great people and some great opportunities that guys shouldn't look past. And Denzel is one of those people. You got Justin just come back to the BBL, Matthew, the guys at London City Royals that have all come home. We can make it what we want, and I don't ever see myself necessarily being involved at that level, but it can be something that I think young kids aspire to, and I definitely don't turn any of our kids away from it. I say, contrary to the fact of everyone thinks we send all of our kids to the States, it's not the only pathway. I think that it's a good exit route for a lot of kids as well.
So we're jumping around a little bit, but going back to your early playing days, started at Westminster, ended up in Brixton.
Yeah.
So how did the switch come about? Why the switch?
Weird. Jimmy didn't really recruit, to be honest. But what happened is there used to be, and you would know this very well, there used to be a summer tournament called Rough and Ready, which was essentially, it was the London All-Star game combined with a team from the North, because there weren't really teams in North London at that time. And And it's weird story. I played in the very first one, but I didn't actually play, and I learnt a very harsh life lesson from Jimmy Rogers. Is essentially, I never got the meet in time for the event, and I didn't really understand what the event was going to be. But the South team said, it was North versus South in a junior all-star game, and the South team wanted not just to be Brixton players, they wanted somebody else. And so Jimmy called up Steve. Steve said, yeah, I've got this little point guard. I think I should send him down. Junior Williams took me down there, and I turned up like 20 minutes after the meet time, and I never knew what the meet time was. Junior just told me to come, and Jimmy was like, I don't know who you think you are, son. I don't know how they do it at Westminster, but down here, and true story. And I went there and I sat on the bench, and I was at the end of the bench for this whole game, and people were shouting my name in the crowd. It was quite embarrassing. I didn't realise how great Rough and Ready would be. It was the very first one, and it kind of taught me a valuable life lesson that if you don't know what the meeting time is, go and ask. Like, find out, especially if it's something that's going to be important. And also, don't judge whether you know something's going to be important or not. You need to understand that everything should have a level of importance if you want to do it. And we were sitting down after the event, and I was sitting with a friend of mine, Sammy Saki, who
I went to university with Sam.
Sammy was we were like two peas in a pod at Brixton. Another story behind that. We would always be together at Brixton playing and pushing each other and stuff like that. And we sat and we were watching the men's game at Rough and Ready, and he kind of said to me, we play against you at Westminster. You got, a couple of good players on your team, but you should come and play with us. And I was like, come to Brixton. It's like, I can't leave my team though. I'm loyal. And he's like, it's not about loyalty, and kind of, persuaded me in such a way. And it was all well and good. And I didn't handle the situation well. I was young. I didn't tell Steve. Steve overheard a conversation with me talking to somebody else, and I got blitzed, but I still decided to go. And I told Jimmy, I said, I'd like to come down to Brixton. And I walked into this environment and this culture that really, Westminster, I think, I got this saying, it's quite cliche, but I say Westminster Warriors made, Brixton Topcats raised, because I would never have played basketball if it wasn't for Westminster Warriors. But I feel like Brixton is the place that took me to really loving it and feeling like I wanted it to be part of the rest of my life. And it was just this unreal culture of obviously, people know Jimmy used to be in the army, and he had this drill sergeant thing about him. And when you're a 15, 16-year-old kid in London and single parent family, struggling for identity, struggling to understand who you really are, you look at this man who's pushing you and you're like, I want a compliment from that guy. Like, I want that guy to make me feel like I've done something right. And you would work at Brixton for Jimmy compliments, and you wouldn't get them very often, but you would work really, really hard for them. And just the environment, there were some phenomenal people down there. Some of my best friends to this day are still, my junior friends from Brixton Topcats. And so we played there for a couple of years, and it was a really good experience, really good time for me.
What do you think made Brixton Topcats so special?
It was different back then. There was less competition, so it was it was Brixton Topcats and London Towers, or Hackney White Heat as it became, and they were the premier programmes. Then you had Humpflong with East London Royals, and then there wasn't much else at that level. I guess you had Jack over in Chessington, had a really good team as well. And I gravitated to Brixton because of how the culture was. And the culture was basically about accountability. It was about inclusivity as well. Jimmy wouldn't turn anyone away from the club. And I loved the fact that we would always be pushing each other. And some of my greatest basketball memories, we used to train at a school called Bishop Thomas Grant. And some of my greatest basketball memories and most torturous basketball memories are at BTG, Jimmy making us do 51 backboard taps, and he would open the gym door and he would take a chair out. You'd have to run around the chair, and the chair would sometimes go down the hill, and then he would say, forget the chair, go to the tree. And it would be points where I would feel like, I cannot do this anymore. And there were lessons in resilience and toughness and different things like that. And everybody seemed to have good character and were nice people and were welcoming, and the environment and the culture was good. And you know, Hackney White Heat was different at the time. They were very confident. They were very, you know, there was an element of being cocky, and I don't say that in a negative way, but you know, you need to breed confidence in young adults. And we had a fierce rivalry with them, like really, really fierce on-court rivalry. But we were all cool with each other off the court, and we would get on. But I would never go and play for White Heat after I'd played for Brixton, and they would never come and play for Brixton after we played White Heat. And I think there's a few players that have kind of crossed over the years, but it was just something about Brixton and the culture that I really, really loved and gravitated towards. And I still credit it to this day that it helped massively shape my character and who I am today.
So was the aspiration at this point to be a professional basketball player?
The aspiration at 18, 19 years old was to grow as a person and understand who I was, because I had very limited direction. And
were you consciously aware that that was your aspiration? Because that's a mature thing at 18, 19 to be like, I want to grow as a person. That's kind of what I'm trying to do at the moment. That's a mature thing to say as a teenager.
It is and it isn't. I guess for me at that time, if you're searching, and we're always all searching for new knowledge and to grow as people, I didn't have any long-term aspirations. At 18, Jack, who now runs, I don't know what they're called anymore, London United,
London United.
London United. So Jack, who ran it, used to do annual trips to the States, and he took a bunch of us over there, and we went to ACC camp, and there was a coach there that was interested in me from an NIA school, and they recruited me, and they would call my mum, and Jack came to my house to speak to my mum and said, you know, it would be a good opportunity. And I just thought, I'm not mature enough for this. Like, I'm not going to go and live 4,500, 5,000 miles away with, you know, an academic. I was never academic. I didn't like school. And so I just felt like, I don't think that's for me at this moment in time. And the interest quickly dwindled because, you know, it was something that just wasn't, I wasn't too keen on it. And I felt like at the time, it was about me finding out who I was and being around stuff. And a couple of times, you know, I would go away from the game. I stopped playing for a year, got very lost in life. And I always found that being around basketball has been my sanctuary. It's given me something to keep working towards and push. And so I still don't know what I want to be or what I want to do, you know, 20 years later. But I've kind of realized what I'm halfway good at and how I'm able to impact people and how I'm able to survive on a daily basis and kind of live my life. And I guess, yeah, it was started at Brixton, and Westminster Warriors is a massive part of it as well. But at that stage, I'd say 20, 21 years old, I was at a point where I was definitely searching and I needed something. And basketball now, 20 years later, I could tell you that's what it provided. It provided me with the stability that I needed in life.
At that point, did you have anything in the back of your head thinking one day coaching could be the thing?
Never be a coach.
Really?
I always coached. Steve, if you know Steve and Jimmy, then you know that you're going to coach. You're going to go on a Saturday morning. You're going to do the Saturday session. Steve used to, when I'd finished college, Steve would give me a bag of balls. He'd put me on a bus and I would go and coach some primary school somewhere in West London. Often it would be me and Junior Williams would get on the bus, we'd split up, we'd go in different directions. We always used to go to Pimlico on a Wednesday and go to 2 different primary schools. And so I coached, like I knew how to do drills and stuff with kids, but it wasn't till years later when the split with Westminster Warriors and Pioneers happened, and Pioneers set up a new club down the road, and Steve was without coaches to coach the junior program, and he approached me in Narmo, and kind of interesting story because he threw us in at the deep end. He said, you know, I need some help to coach the juniors, and we were like, okay, so, you know, we're kind of busy, but we'll do it. We were doing Midnight Madness at the time and whatnot, and he was like, okay, well, meet me at practice on the Monday, and you know, we'll see what happens. And it was at Paddington Academy. We went down there, and there was one kid, and so we were like, where's the team? And he said, that's your team. He said, you need to recruit, you know, the rest of the team. And I was like, well, how are we going to do it? And that was kind of like the beginning. I think it was 2007, 2008. That was the start of my coaching career. And I started it. I did it for a few weeks and just thought, this is something I could do, something I could be a part of. And people used to tell me, not necessarily the X's and O's stuff, people used to tell me the interaction and how we managed the kids and how we were around them was something that they thought was a talent or an ability. And so I've just kind of stuck with it for the last 10 years, and I never envisaged that I would be at this point doing what I'm doing at the moment. It was never a career goal of mine. I've kind of just stumbled into it, to be honest.
So away from basketball during your 20s, what were you doing career-wise?
I worked, it's weird actually, because it was a huge character building experience for me as well. I worked in telesales, or I don't know if you call it telesales. Yeah, you would. It's basically used to sell mobile phones over the phone for Car Phone Warehouse. But because I worked in sales, they would do all of these CPD and career development and try and help you. And they sent me on courses, and I would do all of these leadership programs and self-awareness things and stuff like that. And it was huge for me at the time, because I got into, as many people do at some stages, into reading self-help books and understanding yourself and things like that. And it's weird, because in my early 20s, I was the guy that read a book and someone mentioned something. I'd be like, well, no, actually, you need to do it like this because I read it in this book, and, this is how you live life. And it's like, you just read that 5 or 6 days ago. And so I got away from that and started to realize that, everything is relative to everyone's situation. Not everything is applicable at all times, but you should use your natural human feel as to how you approach each situation. And so I was working in Car Phone Warehouse, and then I think 2004, I was playing at Westminster Warriors, and Nama was the head coach, and we were close. We had a good relationship, good, coach and point guard relationship. And I remember us sitting outside Mobley for, I think Nama will remember better than me, and Nama likes to extend things over years as well. So it felt like a 12-hour conversation. We definitely left there in the middle of the night and started after practice, and we were just talking about life and how you want to progress and move forward and the things that we would want to do. And he told me about Midnight Madness. I told him about, I was into life skills, and I wanted to work with young people to give them life opportunities and stuff like that. And we kind of spoke about the synergy of how the two could work together, and that he was already doing, or he had done, Midnight Madness previously. It was something that he'd done in the early 2000s, and I played in it as a player, and so I kind of understood what it was. And by the end of that conversation, we decided, like, we're gonna bring this thing back. We're gonna make it, a big thing. And it was a really good time of my life, and a good experience to be around that, to kind of get that back to, and supersede how it was before, to be honest. It grew massively. So
you essentially became Nama's right-hand man on Midnight Madness over the course of, how many years were you involved in the end?
I would always resent the word right-hand man, only because somebody said that years before, and I think that we were partners, but partners in a different way. He's definitely more experienced and older than me, but I think that I would bring different things to the party that no one would ever challenge that Nama wasn't the face of Midnight Madness. Yeah. But I think if, for the players, for the people that are around it, I think that they would have seen me as the connection and the person that worked on the nuts and bolts and was the operations manager and made things happen. And I felt like it was a good partnership. It worked well. Nama is a visionary. He's a dreamer. I'm a nuts and bolts person that makes things happen, and it worked really well for a long time.
So that was 2004 when you first got involved, was it?
When we decided to bring it back in 2005 was when it made its return to Brixton.
How many years did it have a break then? So I didn't even realise that it had a break.
I think it had a break for like 2 years maybe. I think Nama did it. I think he started 99, 01, 02, 99, 2000, 01, 02, and then had a little break for a period of time. I know he got married in that time, had a child and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was definitely 04 we had the conversation, 05 we decided to bring it back in the scale that it was.
For obviously Midnight Madness, it's been a bit quiet on Midnight Madness' front over the last couple of years. I guess for any younger people that are listening that sort of don't know the history and kind of what it was and what it did, can you give us a sort of brief overview about the sort of scale that it got to?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge. And you say that about the younger generation now. None of the kids at Cola have any clue who I am past 5 years ago. They think I was born at Cola. I never did anything prior to that. Some of them doubt I ever had hair. It's like crazy situation because I did have 30 plus years of life before it started. But the scale of Midnight Madness was one of the things. I think one of the big misconceptions, people always thought we were doing really well, and those guys are they're really successful and they're living well off it. And it was such a grind, it was such a struggle, to the point where we would work ridiculous hours. We would be going from one event to another event. Marvin Addy, who's one of my best friends, who used to do the road shows and stuff like that, was like, bro, this is insane. Like, we're literally having 2 hours sleep going in between each stop and stuff like that. But it was, I don't know if reality TV was out back then, but if someone was to follow us on a reality TV show like that back then, it was a really good time. It was enjoyable. And we would get, depending on where you are in the country, 400 or 500 players in a gym for the finals. And sometimes I think that the numbers are a bit skewed for the finals, depending on who the performer was and stuff like that, because you can never look past that. But we had 8,500 people, I think it was, at Wembley when in 2008 when Busta Rhymes performed. We had Crystal Palace, more packed than I've ever seen Crystal Palace, when Chris Brown was there. And some of the basketball experiences were really, really enjoyable. And I made some great friends along the way, met some really good players. And I think it supported a lot of people's dreams along the way as well. There were a lot of people that did quite well, that got opportunities to go off to the States and things like that. Like, it was beneficial to a lot of people. I think the freeness of it all impacted the game as well. There was a sense of entitlement after a little while. People would walk up and say, I'm here, like, where's my t-shirt? It's like, you've been to the last 4 and got a t-shirt of the last 4. You want the 5th t-shirt? And it would sometimes be like that. And I didn't really like that side of it. I always felt like maybe we should have scaled some of the things down at the time. But great time of life. Went to some amazing places all over the world. Watched some phenomenal stuff. I was speaking to Drew Spinks the other day, who came on a trip to Chicago, and I remember what that team did. And we went and played against a select team from Chicago, and they ended up beating them, and it was just a good time. It was very, for me, gave me an enjoyable experience in my 20s to say, I've done some things, I've achieved some stuff, and I've been around and met some great friends. So it was a good time, and I think it helped a lot of people along the way.
I mean, it was perfectly timed with the rise of street ball and the street ball culture and everything around that. It was it was perfect. I think my actual first interaction with you would have been in 2009. Yeah. When that was the first sort of proper event. Yeah. I mean, the first event I filmed, that was Future Stars, and then the next one was calling you and trying to get permission to follow you guys around all summer.
When we said no.
Well, we for the finals, but yeah, the qualifiers, spent the entire summer following you around, and it was a grind. Like, I mean, it was my first exposure to really British basketball culture, having so many people in the gym, and it was incredible for me. Like, I was just like, this is unbelievable. Does it make you sad now that it's not around, or do you think that it was perfectly placed for its time and kind of it's time to move on from it now?
I think for me it was time to move on, definitely. I needed, for my own personal life where I was at the time, and there's, I always hear people say, oh, why did you stop and what happened? There was no drama behind it. Nama and I sat down, we had a conversation. I told him I need to grow up and be a man, and, at the time I was living at home and it was time for me to do something on my own. And I think, you don't outgrow a situation, but everything runs its course after a while, and it will always be Namo's baby, and it's something that he loves and that he, absolutely. I think if you were to go and approach Namo today and say Midnight Madness next year, it's going to be back, it's going to be here, and I never fault him for that. It's something that he did really, really well for a long time. And for me, it was just about growing up. It was about me going to the next chapter of my life, and like I said, I benefited from it. Financially, no. Everyone seems to think that it was a really good time for us like that, but it wasn't. But just from a growth standpoint, like, I learned a lot of skills to be able to organize events of that size. And when I talk about the nuts and bolts, I would do a lot of the organizing. Namo would network, he would speak to people and stuff like that, and then I would put it together. I would manage the relationships with the players and stuff like that. And I'll never forget, Junior used to call my BlackBerry back in the day. Junior would call it the BlackBerry because it had everybody's number in it, and there would be certain players that would call me and they would want individual rundowns, like what's going on this summer, and I would say, just wait for the announcement. But our announcements were always late. You know, you'd have to wait until July for the announcement and stuff like that. So I couldn't wrong people for wanting to know. But for me, yeah, it wasn't. There was no scandal behind it, no anything negative. It was just time to move on. And do I think that there's scope for it to come back? Yes, but probably in a different format now, just in a different way, because the culture's different, the generation's very, very different. But summer basketball, you know, you run your event with huge success, and things like your event, Midnight Madness, Rough and Ready, they help fill a void within a summer that players, they just don't have anything to do. And so I'm sure Narmo will bring it back one day and it will be successful. And the last, you know, even after I left and I stopped doing it, I still took our kids down to go and participate in the clinic and supported them and went to the finals and stuff like that. And it was good. And I just think that the generation's changed a little bit and times have changed. And also the people that want to sponsor events like that, the niche and the demographic that they put their money into now is quite different to what they did in the mid-2000s when we were kind of getting Nike on board and having them want to put money into the UK basketball market. So
jumping back to your coaching, so your first experience was turning up at a gym and one person being there.
One kid.
And then ultimately, with that Westminster Warriors junior club, you ended up with a team that went 24-0, won a national title.
Yeah.
I think that was actually my first junior Final Fours. It was 2010, wasn't it?
2010, yeah.
So that was Ryan Martin, Teddy, Leon Bennett Harris, like absolutely stacked squad.
Yeah.
So yeah, talk about your kind of progression in coaching over the course of, what was that, a couple of years? Like, you know, how you found it, and did you find yourself sort of slowly falling in love with sort of the teaching side of the game?
I used to love coaching with Narmo. We had a really good relationship, and it was weird because we were co-head coaches, but our relationship, we're like older brother, younger brother, but in different dynamics, because Narmo would always seek for decision making and things like that in terms of player personnel and things that always come to me. Always, if there was a life lesson to be taught to the kids, Narmo's brilliant. He can talk for days, and you know, but that stuff would always bounce off me. And it's a shame he doesn't coach now, because he's really good X's and O's wise, and the game's evolved. He probably hasn't coached for 6 or 7 years, but he's very sharp like that. And at that time, I wasn't ready to be a head coach or whatever. But we used to work, and that team, it was weird because Leon Bennett Harris was the first player to come and join, and he came with a player called Yosa Abifade. And there were some other boys. We had a kid, Mustafa Al-Faki. They weren't quite as high profile as the other guys. And what ended up happening is we had the first season and it went okay. And they were all at Midnight Madness that summer, and everybody swears we recruited them, and we didn't. What really genuinely happened is the boys played on a team in Midnight Madness one summer, and they qualified to come to the Morning a Game event that we had with LeBron James, and it was the free showing. And Teddy was like, I never ever thought Teddy was going to come and play for us. And Teddy was like, so what's up with the team this year? And I was like, pardon? He's like, you know, East London Royals, they've only go up to under 16. I need an under 18 team. I'm going to go to Barking Abbey, but I need a club. So, you know, I invited him down to practice, and I gave one of these visionary talks about what I see the season becoming. And Teddy ended up joining, and he and Ryan were good friends. Ryan had established a relationship. Ryan decided to come. Then Iliandro Ignazio came, and they just all kind of fell together. And I remember one of the first practices, Narmo and I ran practice, and we had 2 teams, and we had them going up against each other. We were running scenarios, so end game scenarios and stuff like that. And we were at opposite ends of the court, and we looked at each other and were just like, because we actually had Gabe Olaseni for one game, and then he decided to go back to the club that he was with, Uxbridge Emperors at the time. And it would have been incredible if he was with us, but at that time, just looking at the team, it was like, wow. And to look where they've all gone on to now. And I don't feel, and I don't think Narmo would ever say, I don't feel like we didn't make any of those players. The majority of them started playing elsewhere. It was just about bringing a group together and building a culture. And we had some incredible times that season. And those boys grew so much as human beings. And they got on so well. There was no rivalry between them. And they were so different. And so it allowed us, I remember the best thing that happened to us that season is we lost to Reading in the Cup. We went up to Reading, and Reading had a really good team. They had Kofi Josephs and
Adam Thosby
and Steve Vaughan, and that team was really good. And they were coached by Matt Johnson and JP, and that was tough for me and Namo to go against them. Tactically, they played really good fundamental basketball, and we lost to them in the Cup, and that was the wake-up call that those boys needed to go undefeated. And we learned some harsh life lessons that year. Two of the boys, we were going to an away game at Solent, sorry. And two of the boys came late and gave excuses as to why they came late. And so said, "You were doing what?" One of them said, I was doing something for my mum. So I said, "No problem." I called the mum. I said, "What's he doing?" She's like, "I don't know what he's talking about." I said, "No problem." So we left two of our best players in London. And I'm a huge American football fan, and in American football, because there's so many injuries, they always say, look, it's next man up. Don't pout, don't complain about who's not there. Just coach the next person up to, the best of their ability. And we went down there undermanned, and we walked in, and Solent was so ready for us. They put on a press. We were down 25 at the half, and we came all the way back in the second half through this, talk that we both gave them, and it was a 50-50 talk at halftime. We came all the way back, tied the game on a slightly dubious shot by Ryan Martin. Everyone questioned whether it was after the buzzer or not, but there'd been some calls during the game. I think we were owed one, and Ryan hit the shot to tie the game. We ended up winning in OT, and that was the selling point to these boys, is that we're not going to cheat the process. We're not going to take shortcuts. If you're not going to do what you're supposed to do, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to do this thing the right way. And if you do these things the right way, you'll be able to find success. And they did for the rest of the season. They were absolutely locked in for the whole year. And it was, it was a really successful time and great team to be a part of.
It was something I wanted to get into a little bit later, but since you touched upon it there, maybe it's worth talking about now. It's kind of principles and philosophies and stuff. And one of the things that's always struck me about your programs, even going back to the Westminster days, is when I show up, all of them would come over to me and shake my hand and say hello. Even though a lot of them I'd never met in my life.
That might be because you might put highlights up on the internet. But no, they're supposed to greet adults and show respect at all times.
Yeah. So where does this come from? Like, sort of, what has made you sort of instill these values and kind of, from my standpoint, go way beyond basketball and actually trying to develop young people into adults?
Partly because of what I needed as a kid, partly because of the life lessons that I learned at Brixton and the things that I learned at Westminster Warriors as well. But I'm just very big on standards, and I think if you have standards, then you can achieve many things that you wouldn't if you didn't have standards. And I think that it probably comes from the stuff in my early 20s as well, like doing a lot of reading and trying to educate myself on life and how I can be better. And one of the biggest things that you always read about, if you ever read any self-help book, is the path of least resistance. Are you going to go the easy way, or are you going to do the stuff, and really go the hard way? Is there going to be sacrifice involved in what you're doing? And it's easy to walk into a gym and see an adult and be like, I'm not in the mood. But for me, it's about respect. It's about you being able to look someone in the eye, and you don't have to like everybody. And I say this, and if you want to get more onto the culture, I can talk about the kids at Cola and stuff like that. Because you don't all have to be best friends. We don't have to fake friendship in our environment. But you have to look at those people as your brothers or sisters in basketball, because you're all trying to achieve one common goal. And I stress that so much with all of our kids, and it goes down to the smallest things. And all of the kids at Cola, if they ever listen to this, they'll roll their eyes, and all the kids I've ever coached will probably roll their eyes. I hate sliders, the footwear. I just think that kids walking around wearing those things doesn't set a good example for them conducting themselves or them looking presentable. I don't like kids wearing hoods walking into a gym. I don't think that shows the people that walking in that you're approachable, that you're nice people. And so I always preach to our kids, when you walk into a gym, have your hood off, make sure you got proper footwear on, no headphones. And if someone says, "Hi guys, how are you?" ask them how they are back. And I think some of that stuff comes from my mum as well, and how she raised me. But I think those things are important. If you get those small details, those finer details in right, I think the other things can come. I think that you can learn to be a better basketball player, but it starts with being a good human being and doing the things the right way. And a big part of it is as well, I credit a club for this. I don't know what they were called back then, but they're called Kent Crusaders now. And there was a lady there, Lorraine Dagger. And she did us a favour once. I can't remember what it was. She moved a game or she did something. And we walked in and, you know, she was very polite and really nice to us. And she was speaking to one of the parents, and they wrote an email when I was at Westminster Warriors. I think it was the first year. They wrote an email to Basketball England and just said, what a nice group of kids that Westminster Warriors group are. And I always stress to our kids, you know, stereotypes exist all over the world. And I'm not huge into race stereotypes, but I am into, you know, and when I say I'm not huge into race stereotypes, someone will judge me on that. I just mean in terms of, I'm not going to walk into a room straight away and think that was about race. But what I will do is generational stereotypes can be very, very relevant in this day and age. And people can see a group of kids walk in at 15, 16 years old and judge them and say that they are that type of kid, that they do behave a certain way. And I never want our kids to fit those stereotypes. I want our kids to walk into a gym and people to say, there's a nice group of kids, they're well behaved. Like you said, our kids are going to walk up to you and shake your hand and show you the right level of respect. And I think that if we do those small things, the little intricate things that are easy, it's not hard to do that. Although some people find it difficult because social skills are quite hard to learn in this day. I think it helps. I think it benefits the kids long term. And you just never know who's watching. You never know who's in the gym. We've had some coaches come in our gym that are very, very powerful, very, you know, they've got a lot of connections and weight, but they've come into our gym unbranded. You don't know who they are, and first impressions last a lifetime. And I just think that that's really important for our kids, and I harp on about it. And some of our kids would roll their eyes if they were sitting in here right now. It's like, I've heard it so many times before. They've heard my cliche quotes so many times before, but I just think it's important to stress those things.
On the same basis, you spoke then about you know, about people being late, and so as a result, you know, they didn't get taken to the game. I know that you're strong on grades and education and making sure that
Late and lied.
They were late.
Oh,
and
they
lied.
They
late and they
yeah.
lied. Oh,
so,
okay. Yeah.
I mean, coming late to a game, I figured things out. Like if a kid comes tearing through the door and got sweat dripping down their head and it's genuine and something happened on the train, I'm a flexible human being. I'm not, you know, harsh to the point where I can't understand it. But late and lied, you're never going to play for me. That's just not going to work. And I don't care if you score 25 points or 2 points. I'm going to judge you the same way.
So has that? Can you think of any occasions where that has actually led to you losing games because you've been missing players because of they haven't sort of upheld their standards? 2010,
we had that incredible team. 2012, I think we had just an incredible team, and those boys weren't committed in the same way that the 2010 boys were, and we got upset in the first round or second round of the playoffs against Barking Abbey at Mobley. We were undefeated in the season. The boys were phenomenal. We had so much talent. But they just didn't carry themselves the right way.
I was at that game, I think.
You were probably at that game.
That was with when you had Terrell Isaacs, Joe Jr.
Yeah. Unbelievably talented team, but we didn't live the right way, and they learned the lesson the harsh way. And I've got so much time for all of those boys. They're wonderful human beings. They're great kids. But at the time, as a unit, we weren't mature enough to win that game. We didn't turn up with the right mentality and got upset on our home floor. And I talk about those two teams to our current kids, not to vilify one and glorify the other, but just about your decisions. And life to me is about choices. And I always say to our kids, one of the biggest things, I kind of use this more towards education, but it's to do with basketball as well. When any kid leaves me, I want you to have options, not limitations. I want a kid that wants to come to Cola, a young person, if they come to interview or whatever, what I say is work as hard on your GCSEs between now and, you know, when you have your exams. Control what you can control, because between now and that time, if you do everything you can walk in here and you can tell our school what you want to do, instead of sitting here in our school telling you, well, you can pick these 3 courses. And I want that for all of our kids that are involved in our program. I want them to have options and not limitations. And so with those teams, those 2 teams, to me, parallel with talent. But one team made a choice for complete sacrifice and another team decided to do it their own way. And the end outcome, is written in history now. We can't change that.
So I'm aware of time here, and we haven't really got onto Cola, which is one of the sort of the big things that I wanted to focus on. Obviously, from my standpoint, Cola kind of came out of nowhere and experienced a lot of success very quickly, and produced a lot of players very quickly. A lot of players end up in the States and still in the States. And take me back to the start of City of London Academy. How did it come about? What was the conversation, and kind of what made you get involved with that? I would assume would that have meant your first switch into full-time basketball coaching? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So I was. It was partly off the back of that 2012 team. In terms of, I was around those boys and the younger age group, not so much then, but the younger age group. I would always keep up with the teachers. Even when I was coaching at the club, I would go and see form tutors. I would visit schools and stuff like that. And at the time, I was working with Reach and Teach, and it was fairly flexible and managed my own time. And as long as I was getting my work done during the day, I could go and visit schools and stuff like that. But I felt like I was having an impact with the kids, but not the impact that I wanted. Kind of seeing them 6 to 8 hours a week, 4 hours for training, and whatever happened with the games. And so I looked at the stuff that was going on, and I don't know if it was the EABL back then or what it was. I don't know if it was formed in 2012.
I should know this, but no, it wouldn't have been formed in 2012.
But Lloyd Gardner, who, I'd say he's a good friend of mine now, but back then we'd played against each other as 17, 18-year-olds. We had a year when we were at Brixton where Ware absolutely dominated us, and they had a phenomenal team back in 97, 98, and they dominated everybody. And then the following year, I think Duncan had left and moved on, and Lloyd was there himself. And so Lloyd and I always familiar with each other. And then we had the synergy with Ryan and Teddy playing, and again, we would have to communicate and liaise about those guys. And so I just called Lloyd one day and I said, how does the basketball academy stuff work? Like, what's the situation of it? Like, what do you want to do? And to my surprise, he was like, oh, well, come and meet me, Mark and I, and we'll talk about it. And I thought, okay, can give me the blueprint of what you guys do. And they basically did. They sat down and they told me how it works. And at the end of the conversation, I thought, why are you guys telling us we need people to play against? There's not a lot of competitive academies. I know SGS were getting good at that time and Copleston was around, but there was probably 5 or 6 maybe teams at that time. It wasn't, Barking seemed very dominant, and it was honest. They were like, we need people to play against. And I said, okay, well, I appreciate it. I think I told him some stuff to do with what I was doing in the community at the time as well, maybe to just as a trade-off to help. And we pitched the idea to the school in end of 2012, leading into 2013, and we pitched the idea to the school.
Why that school?
There were 5 schools, and that school had great facilities, and the PE teacher was a little bit of a visionary at the time, Mr. Griffin, who to me is a legend. I actually went out with him last night, and we caught up. But he was doing a master's degree whilst being the head of PE, and he was doing a master's in education and leadership. And he saw the things that I put in the proposal as things that could really benefit the school and the academy. And our first year of recruitment was really interesting because we had all these kids scheduled for recruitment. Sterling was coaching at Southwark Pride and I was coaching Westminster Warriors, and those kids were the kids that were going to come to the school. And about 75% of them, probably more than that to be honest, came to the school, realised the entry requirements, couldn't get on the courses they wanted to do, and left. And we were really left with Denzel as the main featured player, and I'll always have love for Denzel because he could have gone somewhere else, could have, decided, and he was at the time just thought, what, this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to stick with it. And we ended up with probably 5 players for the first year, and it wasn't really what you'd think it would be. But obviously we had strong junior players from Westminster, and I'd cleared it with Steve. I told Steve Alexander, this is my intention, I want these boys to come down and be a part of the academy, and obviously we had the kids coming over from the Pride as well, and it was only 2014 where we had the first proper cohort of kids.
So was your first season 2012-13 or 2013-14?
2013-14.
Okay. That would have been the first season of the EABL.
Okay.
Yeah. You weren't in it that year? Was it the next year you joined?
Gosh,
Years, I'm getting all mixed up.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. We're in our 4th year now. This is our 4th year that we're starting. But the first year at Cola, where we didn't have the cohort that we wanted or that we intended to get, was so beneficial for the kids that went to Cola, because they had 2 full-time basketball coaches in the school. So some of the girls,
you were just working with the pupils rather than actual.
We would still have team training for the clubs and stuff like that. But those kids, like you look at people like Toyosi Abiola and Chandra Jones and Geddy and Kumar and those, they were at the school. So true blood kids that started at the school, and they got a year of just intense basketball. And I don't think they knew what happened, especially the 2 girls. They were just in school. All of a sudden they had coaches in school all the time, and they were being taken all over London to playing games, and they played in the CBL and stuff like that. And I felt like it grew, and we just had a lot of opportunity kind of come together all at once. And then obviously 14, 15, we had the cohort come from the clubs, and we understood the school a lot more. I think the first year in recruitment, I was like, can I get in or not? It's like, no, they don't have the entry requirements for the courses they want to do. Because
you're quite a strong academic school compared to some academies, right?
It's a high academic school. Like I wouldn't, I don't want to say anything on air I might compromise myself, but it's a high attainment school. Like we achieve a lot, and at the moment we're only doing A levels, and the school are going to get back to doing BTECs, but that means it only caters for a certain type of student. So a lot of kids want to come to Cola and don't get in, unfortunately, which we'd love to do, because we try not to turn people away. And I think that was one of the things when I spoke to Lloyd and Mark about starting a basketball academy. One of the biggest things is they're very transparent at Barking. They're an elite basketball academy. They want the best kids. They're going to develop the best kids to the next stage and send them off, on their way. I always wanted us to have a community feel as well, to provide an opportunity for, the someone who is in a situation, because in my junior team in Brixton, I was talented, but when I went from Westminster to Brixton, we had some phenomenal players that, I had to find a niche to be on the team. And I always wanted Cola to be that type of place that someone could play just because they liked the game, not just because, they were one of the best players in the country. And that's just the difference. It's not to slate anybody else or say anything negative about anyone else. That's just what I wanted to do at the time, and how I thought that it would pan out. So, it's a different place. It's sometimes you can walk in there and it can look really, really elite, and sometimes you can walk in there and it feels like a community club and a community vibe, and so it's quite different.
So at that point when you bought in, you had players obviously at Westminster, and then you had Sterling Machette, who was running Peckham Pride, as it was known. Yeah. Peckham Pride weren't a National League club at that point, whether they were just
they had under-15s.
They
had under-15s National League, yeah.
But mainly their focus was the CBL and playing the local stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be careful with how I say it, but it wasn't a club as such. It wasn't run in a way that the growth was going to be there. Yeah. As soon as it moved to Cola, we had the Division 4 team. We had, we decided to start entering women's teams and stuff like that. And it grew, but you had an influx of talent at that place as well, at that club, in terms of, young, raw talent that needed to be in a place that was going to harness it and develop it and kind of push them on to the next level.
I think when I look at Cola, the biggest thing that separates what you do compared to other places is the culture. Is that intentional? Like when you had the plan, when you had the blueprint that you took to City of London Academy, did you factor that in? Did you put that in? This is what we want to try and do, because there's very few sort of school games, the ABL games, that people are showing up to, and there's 150, 200 kids there on the sideline watching, screaming, shouting. Like, you've got some of the best support and club feel in the country, and you've done that it's not a club that's been around for 30, 40 years, so you've had the time to build up. It's happened in such a short period of time. Yeah. So when you talk about sort of creating that culture, like, how have you done that?
Could just be pot luck. You never know. We could have got lucky and been in a school where, a lot of kids take interest. But we always did key stage 3 and 4 coaching. So there's not many kids in Cola that haven't been engaged in basketball in some way, shape or form. And then I find it difficult to understand why it doesn't happen in other schools. Not, I guess our sports was not really even in the main building. It's detached. It's over in the sports block. But if you know that Barking Abbey are coming to Cola and you're a 14, 15-year-old kid, you've got to go and watch that game, surely. And we put posters up in the school and advertise and stuff like that. And I guess one of the biggest things, and I talk to all of the kids before they join the school about it, is you never know who's watching you. And it's not just who's watching you from your own career perspective, as in, is a coach watching you as a coach, in the gym that you don't know about, but you never know who your hero is. And I had heroes when I was in year 7 in school, guys that were in the sixth form that I just thought were grown men, unbelievably cool. Now, many years later, I look back, they were 16 and 17 years old, but they looked like they had life figured out and they'd sorted things out. And if they're carrying themselves a certain way and they're behaving a certain way, I'm going to go and emulate that behavior. And so it happens in all basketball academies. They have their tracksuits and stuff like that. In our academy, you only wear your tracksuit 2 days a week. You wear it on Wednesday, which is game day, and you wear it on Friday as a reward if we've been doing what we're supposed to do, because it's the last day of the week and it's more of a, I don't want to say a more relaxed day, but it is. Our school finishes slightly early on a Friday as well. So they're the reason that they wear those tracksuits, but they're so visible, and especially in a regular inner city London school, having 6'6", 6'7" kid walking around wearing a red tracksuit, you stand out, and you never know who's watching. You never know what that person is learning from you at that time. And so I stress to all of our kids over and over again, you have to be a role model. You have to conduct yourself the right way, because you are influencing the next generation. You're impacting them. And if you're carrying yourself in the wrong way, you never know who you're going to lead in the wrong direction. And if you're carrying your way in the right way, you never know who you're going to inspire. And I think that that's a huge emphasis within our school. It's really important. And part of that, it also comes from Mr. Griffin as well, because he was the PE teacher when we first started. He's moved on now, but he's very much built like that. He thinks that being a young role model, especially if you're cool basketball player, if you're a 6-foot girl or you're a 5'3" point guard that can run shapes all around people, and people because if you ask any of the younger kids in any basketball academy, they'll have a favorite player. What does that favorite player do that you like? What do they do that you want to copy and you emulate? And I think that we put a huge responsibility on those kids' shoulders, that you have to carry that responsibility and live it out in the right way. And I also bring a lot of people into our academy that I think are good role models. So we have Ogo Adigboy, who comes down sometimes and works with the kids. Steve Veer used to come down and help us. Marvin Addy used to come down and be a part of the academy. Brian Naguru, who has just got his degree at UEL, he comes down and he's our new strength and conditioning coach. We were blessed to have Paddy Waplington, who was the Commonwealth strength and conditioning coach. And Paddy's just a good human being. He helps instill life skills. We have a brilliant PE department. It's no one thing that I can tell you there's a formula. It's just, I think if there's one thing I always aim for, is to set standards for the kids and hold them to those standards if they want to achieve. If they don't want to achieve, if it's not your goal, I'm not going to push you to play basketball. I'm not going to push you into a scholarship in the States if you don't want to do it. But if you tell me you want to go to the States and get a scholarship, I'm going to hold you to that account. And if you fall short of it, we're going to have to address it. And that's kind of the thought process behind the place.
Do you find, if you speak to the younger kids in the school, that they do look up to, the older kids in the school, and also potentially kids that have come before them and gone on to scholarships in the States and stuff?
Massively. That is the huge part of it, is that they aspire to be like the older generation. If I was to, you and I were to walk into Colin now, and I was to say to a year 7 kid, probably one that's been involved in basketball and not just a random kid, but if I was to say to them, who do you like, they would say, Toyosi was my favorite, or, Shaq was my favorite, this one, Ty was my favorite. And one of the things we would do as well is get those older kids to talk to the younger kids, and if something goes wrong, sometimes, I think I spoke to Lloyd about this the other day. It's like sometimes people mistake being calm and cerebral as you coaching in the right way. Sometimes you just can't talk anymore. Sometimes, if I've been banging my head against a brick wall with a kid, sometimes kids teaching kids is the most powerful thing, because they can relate to a young person far better than they can to now me. When I was at Westminster Warriors, I used to think, I'm late 20s, early 30s, I'm still cool. They kind of think, that there's some connection. But now I'm older, I feel the gap the gap is widening itself, and there's nothing better than somebody who's in their own age group that they can relate to. Being able to give the message, and kids teaching kids is really powerful.
The other thing is that school seems to have really got behind it. The thing that I'll always remember is when after you won the WEABL title.
Yeah.
And when the girls came back to the school, there was this video of them walking into the main lobby, and there's just the entire school, it seems, giving them a round of applause and cheering. I think there was a band, or there was just all sorts of craziness. Yeah,
I would love to pretend that I had something to do with that, but I didn't. That was our old head of school, Mr. Huntley, so he definitely deserves a shout out. And he organised it, and I'm a huge Rocky fan, so playing the Rocky theme was incredible. And for me, if I was to single out one moment in my life where I really felt like, wow, we've done something special, it was that moment. Those girls, as they walked out in front of their school, they were heroes and they were icons, and the whole school was there late, around the balconies, and it was just a really, really special moment. So the school have brought in, we've had a lot of support over the years. I think the ACE program's been big for us. Charlie Ford, who managed that's always been really, really supportive to us as well. I definitely have to, mention his name. John Wise, who runs ACE, those guys have really supported us, along the way. Paul Fisher too. We've never had anything but support. Every time we've hit a roadblock, they've helped us, and you as well. I know you don't want to take the compliment, but you've supported us through the EABL over the years, and we had many slip-ups. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to sit here and say that we haven't screwed up. We haven't, had our issues along the way. But one of the biggest things I say to our kids is that there's nothing more powerful in life than the power of your word. And if you can't keep your word to yourself, you can't keep it to other people. Now, you can be late, you can screw things up, but if people know that you're genuine and you're going to keep your word on something, they'll trust you, they'll work with you, they'll want to be able to support you. And Jesse too, I shouldn't leave out Jesse Cezanne as well. Those guys and you as a collective always supported us, because I think you could see that even if we were struggling to load our game to cross over, you'd be like, look, Jackson, come on, man. Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you cleared the cache? Like, do something different. But we were always trying. It was never a time where, like I said, I want to walk my talk with these kids. I want to be a role model. I want them to know that if I'm inspiring them and telling them that they can do things, that I've got to try myself. I've got to do things. And so part of how we've got to where we've got to at the moment is because of trying to walk the talk and not just being people that say one thing and do something else. And so, with the support that we've had in the growth of the academy from Basketball England and the league and stuff like that, it's been about fulfilling what we've promised, not being the type of people to sign up to something. We play the games, the players want to come to Kohler, and then we don't deliver on the other end. I think that the power of your word is really, really important in life.
One thing I always seem to, I sort of forget is how important it is to have the school's backing.
Yeah.
With all these academies, at any point, if a new head teacher comes in, or someone, in senior management decides that they don't want a basketball program, it could all fall down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
How do you get a school to support you? Do you have sort of regular communication where you're, feeding back the things that you're doing, the success stories that you've had, to get the buy-in, or how does that process work?
It's difficult, if I'm honest. I think anyone who runs a basketball academy around the country will speak to the fact that it's quite a volatile environment. It can change at any time. Like, I couldn't tell you in 2 years Kohler is going to be what it is now. It could grow and become even bigger than it is now, or it could in 2 years. We're actually about to change our head teacher. And so I don't know. We've got a brilliant head teacher, very personable, spent a lot of time with him, helped me out greatly over the years. And so he's very in favour of basketball. We don't know who the next person's going to be. And so we're lucky we've got a brilliant vice principal who's my line manager at the moment, who supports in a big way. And for the duration of time that he's there, I think that it will continue to be successful. But you never know. A new head could come in, and the new head could just be like, this resource that we're putting here, let's go and put it over here. and English and maths is a huge thing in schools at the moment. You know, it's a big focus, and if they decide that they want another maths teacher or another English teacher and one less basketball coach, or, you know, make somebody go part-time, then the dynamic of the situation changes. So I wouldn't say there's any basketball academy in this country that is a lock to stay there for a long time, unless they've got a brand new head teacher or they've got, you know, something. But what we can always guarantee the kids that come in is that we'll be there for the duration of your 2 years or your 3 years. Nobody's gonna bail halfway through your situation, hopefully, but you never know what can happen. Everyone's got, you know, your own life journey, but it's quite an interesting situation. There's no guarantees, because ultimately it's enrichment. That's how it's pitched in the school. And enrichment, whilst extremely important, is not compulsory, or the type of enrichment isn't compulsory. You can do anything. You know, our school's got loads of different clubs, as every school has. We've got music club, drama club, gym club and stuff like that. So as long as you're putting on enrichment, it just so happens that our school sees basketball as a huge focus at the moment.
And the other thing that I think is very noticeable about Kohler is the fact that you develop so many of your own players from a young age. So you don't necessarily need to recruit as much as maybe other places, because you just seem to have this little sort of conveyor belt of talent coming through. You know, what's your philosophy on that? How do you approach that to ensure that
insanity? Just work 7 days a week, and I mean, to ensure that we've got the players coming through. And it's not really to ensure they're coming through, because not every kid wants to come to Kohler that plays as part of the club. And the club and the school are two very separate things. You know, for you kind of have to understand a school's objectives, and our school's objective is not to necessarily have a community club that operates under a different name. But if it operates under the same name, then, you know, there are different things that need to take place and whatnot. And so we have the kids that play for the club, and they want to be a part of it. And we have around 2 under-16 teams. Last year we had some under-14 teams, and they move up. But it's just to have, you know, an opportunity for younger kids to play within our environment. And what we ended up having is a lot of second generation kids, so younger brothers and sisters that wanted to be a part of it. And that's what kind of remained. And we've kind of got top heavy the last year or so. Like, we're under 16, we're under 18, we've got senior teams. We haven't necessarily got the under 12s in place. We've just started under 12s again, or restarted. So there are always gaps, and it's tough. Anyone who runs a basketball club will understand about resource and opportunity and funding and stuff like that is really, really hard. And I wouldn't say we're the greatest at it in the world, but you're always going to have these younger kids that want to play, and we have the younger kids at Kohler, and we have the younger kids from in and around Southwark who want to be a part of the program as well. And so I guess the success of the older ones will draw in younger ones and allow them to want to play. So.
One thing I did want to touch upon was the switching of the name from Peckham Pride to Southwark Pride. What was the thought process behind that?
Just to be more encompassing. Peckham's an area, Southwark's a borough, and so, you know, that was just it. It wasn't anything to do with Peckham as such. It was just to be more encompassing, so that kids from outside of Peckham would believe that they can identify it and want to be a part of it. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So then, when you started Kohler, I'm gonna assume that was when that marked your switch from coaching young men to young women.
Not the first year. We were both in different places, so coaching the boys and the girls, and it just made more sense to have one side and the other, rather than and I'd never really coached girls prior to that. My first time coaching girls was London Youth Games 2013, but yeah, it was just something that, it was a bit of a bigger project at the time, I think, and one that kind of was refreshing to me. It was something that was new. I miss coaching boys, and Steve Veer, again, dear friend of mine, he always used to say, oh yeah, no, because you're a girls coach. I'm like, I'm not a girls coach, I'm a basketball coach. And Steve will probably listen to this and laugh and say, yeah, okay, put my business out there. But I'm not. I'm a basketball coach, and you never know. Next year I might go back to coaching boys. You just don't know. But for me, coaching the girls at the time was the right thing, and I think it helped with my own personal growth as well.
How do you differentiate, like, when you compare the two? What are the differences? How do you change your approach?
Is this podcast going to be a video as well as okay? So my analogy, and I use it when I speak to the parents about wanting to come, is that girls and boys are built physically and mentally completely differently. And I'm no expert. I say to all of our girls, I can teach you anything about life. I can teach you anything about basketball. I cannot teach you the first thing about being a woman. That's not a niche of mine. But what I can say is that if you imagine getting a young person by the scruff of the neck, by the collar, and the analogy is that with boys, I always feel like you're having to do this. Boys want to do everything. They think they can do everything all the time. But with girls, it's the opposite. You're pushing them away. You're like, go out there, go and be you, go and be great, go and achieve all of the things. And one of the biggest things that we use as a teaching point for our kids is such a simple thing, but it's always the anchor that you can go back to. And anyone who's, read and been a part of self-help, you'll know about well-formed anchors and things that you can take someone back to remind them of a specific event. And so the left-hand layup, or the weak hand layup, because we've had some lefty players over the year, is often something when you meet somebody within the first year or two of them playing, they're always reluctant to try it because it's difficult. And people want to lay the ball up 1,000,001 times with their strong hand. And we're very, very strict on you don't ever use the wrong hand on the wrong hand side, and so if you're going to use your left hand, if you're going to be on the left-hand side, you're going to use your left hand. When they get older, we teach them about, opposite hand finishing and stuff like that. But with the girls especially, once you teach them a left-hand layup, you've always got that anchor to take them back to if they ever tell you that they can't do something, because you can say to them, back in the day, you told me you couldn't do that, and you can. And it's something that now you do on instinct. I don't have to tell you to do it anymore. You just do it. And it's always about teaching. It's always about telling them that your can'ts are yours, that you own them, and nobody else believes them. You tell yourself you can't do something, so you can't. But for me, coaching girls primarily is about life skills. It's about pushing them out there. It's about giving them the confidence. And it's difficult. Girls go through different changes to boys. Hormonally, in adolescent years, they change so much. And so it's about girls pushing them out there and boys sometimes reeling them back. All of our boys think they can play in the NBA. All of our girls, and that's not just the kids that we've got now. I think that's, a generational and a cultural thing, is that you need to empower. And a big part of, I think, my coaching is about empowerment.
When you look at the players that have come through your program or, that you've coached over the years,
mm-hmm.
Is there any particular success stories that stick out in your mind? Maybe a non-obvious one, or ones there where maybe originally you just thought this kid has got no chance of ever being a basketball player, and proved you wrong, or any other nice stories around that?
Everyone with me always goes back to Toyosi and Chandra, because Toyosi was such a freakish athlete, and Chandra was a young player that came along, and I thought that they were terrible when they first started. Like, they were really, really bad. I remember us having a conversation earlier on, and it was about, I've never seen two kids with the skill of being able to lay the ball up off a backboard and the ball bounced so hard off the backboard that it would bounce back past the free throw line. They were professional, those two, at it. It was really bad. And I remember having a conversation maybe 6 weeks into them playing, like, are these kids ever going to figure this out? Because they're really bad. And then we took them to a game, and it clicked, and they just got better. And Toyosi always she's going to hate me for saying, she always had a big problem with the backcourt rule. She says, stupid rule, why can't we just go in the backcourt? And I said, okay, it's a stupid rule, but it's there for a reason, and you need to get used to it. And so they're an interesting story, because they were playing 4 and 5 years, respectively. Toyosi 4 years and Chandra 5 years, and they ended up going off and getting scholarships. But they were grinders. They would come to school at 6:45 in the morning and play for an hour before school. They would be in the gym at lunchtime. They would be in there after school. And I don't think they ever really knew what they were doing. And they never, if you ask them now, they would never say, yeah, we were doing this from a young age for scholarships. They just both ended up in the States on scholarships. But, I mean, there's loads of stories. I've been around so many young people over the years that, you know, I've had kids that play for me that, there was a kid that played for Peckham Pride, and he came up to Westminster Warriors and left and wrote me a letter, Samson Oyidiran. And Samson wrote me a letter and goes, look, I'm just not ready to be here. And then came back a year later, played for us. I never thought Samson would get a scholarship to go to the States, and he ended up, you know, he went up to Preston with Malcolm Leake for a while and ended up at Tennessee State, and he's graduated now. And I didn't necessarily think he would ever make it to that level, but he did. And I mean, there's a lot of kids, and I think it's about harnessing, and I'm no expert. I don't want to sit here and act like I'm the scholarship guru for sending kids to the States, because I'm not. There's loads of really good people out there doing it, but there does come a time where a kid either has that moment where it clicks and you're like, they are going to be good enough, or maybe they have the dip and you're like, oh, I don't know how much they want it and if they're willing to push through. But too many stories, like literally there's too many in terms of kids that, you know, they grind. I would say the one common theme with 90% of the kids that get those opportunities is they sacrifice. They put in the time and they sacrifice, and you know, with hard work it gets them to where they need to be.
You mentioned there about not being a guru about getting kids scholarships to the States, but obviously you have sent a fair few to the States, and I would say you're definitely
I haven't. I always say to all of the kids, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I haven't. A kid gets themselves a scholarship. A coach can never get it for them, because if you're not good enough, no one's going to give it to you anyway. So I've supported.
Fair enough. Okay, you supported. And on that note, like I would definitely say you're up there in the UK as one of the most connected with you know, American college coaches. How has that happened? How has that come about? How have you cultivated those relationships, and how have you made them in the first place? Obviously, you know, it's tough being from England. There's a perception of you know, not good at basketball and this and that. Yeah. How has it all come about?
I have a really dear friend that I met at Midnight Madness in 2005, who you've met, who his name's Pat Connolly. He's been in and around the NBA. When he first came to us, he was a grad assistant at Baylor, and we developed a friendship. He's from Baltimore. I'm a huge Baltimore Ravens fan. I have to plug my team. And he just connected me with some people in 2006 and 2007, and the tree's grown. And I always say to people, Pat kind of started my US network, and I've met people individually from there and stuff like that, you know, separately from that tree. But I would say that the tree started with him and kind of built. And it's weird, the first person was he ever introduced me to was a guy called Mark Moorfield, who used to work at Baylor. He was the associate head coach at Baylor, and we spoke. And now he works in girls basketball, was a Division III coach in Texas, and we spoke yesterday. And so it kind of goes around full circle. And then we've done AAU trips, and we've taken the kids over, and I think that AAU is so important and vital for US coaches, because not many of them come over here. So it's vital that they see the kids in the flesh. If they can see a kid in the flesh, they make up their mind really, really quickly. But tape can, you know, they do it when they're sending the Americans over here to the BBL. You know, you've got a 6'9" power forward that gets off a plane, and they're 6'5", 6'6", and likewise it goes in the other direction. We never do it. I always try and be as transparent as possible, but you know, they don't know if the kid that looks great on a tape over here is going to be what they hope they be over there. And so it's always about getting them to see the players in the flesh. So we invite as many people as we can and take the kids over as often as we can, except the trips are really expensive, so it makes it difficult. But yeah, the network just keeps going. I'm happy to help people. I try not to advise on other people's players because I don't know the kid. And so some people do that, but I'm not really. I might say contact somebody else. Like if Myesco got a player, I might say call Neil. If Lloyd have got a player, I say I don't give appraisals on other people's players. I don't start talking up because I don't know the kid. The kid could not be built for that type of environment, for that type of situation. And so, yeah, it's just, I guess, to be a good person, trying to help out, trying to stay in contact with people. Some of the coaches in the States I would consider friends, not all of them, but some of them are good friends. And I guess it all, it started 13 years ago with my friend Pat, who kind of opened up the connection, and he put me in touch with 10 or 12 schools back then, and I still talk to some of those people today. So.
And so do you send do you think, it's been a couple of months since I've checked in with this coach? Do you sort of try and make a point of checking in with people regularly so that kind of you remain on their radar? Or
it depends who it is. It depends the rapport we've got. Some coaches I just really like. I think they're good people. Some of them, I don't know if I can mention it on the podcast, who is who and stuff like that, but some people will send me coaching stuff and we'll talk about coaching things and stuff like that, and you just meet some really good people. And on the opposite side of it, in US basketball, you got some real car salesmen who I don't choose to speak to very often, and I'll be very candid. I'll never not tell one of our kids if someone shows interest, but I'll give my opinion on it. I don't think that that's the school for you, or I don't think that person is necessarily someone I want to send you to. But I'll reach out to, just depending on who it is, not everybody. I have a WhatsApp group or broadcast list on my phone. So if one of our kids has a highlight tape, I'll broadcast out the highlight tape and say, 2019 kid, 3.4 GPA, SAT score of such and such. And sometimes that's a little bit easier in this day and age with technology than sending an email and doing, I try not to cold call and message people just out of the blue. Hi, coach, I'm Coach Jackson from England, and because they get 150, 200 emails like that every day. And sometimes our kids will come running up to me in school like, Coach, and a coach reply. And I'll say, yeah, they have to reply and they have to do their due diligence. But I always say to our kids, you're not really being recruited until you get an offer from an assistant or you're on the phone to the head coach. That's when a situation with a school becomes real. And I'm always willing to support our kids. Some want to go and I don't necessarily think it's the right situation for them, but who am I to tell you that your dream is not, is not something that you should pursue. My opinion is only my opinion. I'm not right all of the time. Quite often I'm wrong. So I
was going to say, how important do you think it is for kids to get a school that's the right fit for them? We see a lot of, I think so many kids here obviously just so hell-bent on getting to the States. They'll take whatever's going and not really think about who's playing ahead of them, what the location of the school is, what the ethos of the school is. And I think as a result of that, we do see a ridiculous number of kids transferring and changing schools and stuff.
I remember your DNP list from a few years ago, article of which was needed. You should actually put it out there on a yearly basis so that the kids can see it, because it is something that a lot of people don't see on this side, and a lot of young people, it's like so few UK kids really understand their dream. And I think Steve has got his new, recruiting service, which I think is good. And I think there's a couple of coaches that do the due diligence to be able to help people, to be able to help the kids make informed decisions. But you don't know these people, and you need to do your investigations and find out how long's the head coach been there, how long does the head coach intend to be there, is the head coach going to get fired, or could they get offered another job, after you being there for a year. What's the state of play with the assistant that's recruiting you? Is the team going to move conference in the next 3 years, which could impact you? Because if they move to a bigger conference, all of a sudden they can recruit a different quality of player. How assured are you of being there for those 4 years and enjoying your time? And then, geographically, is it a fit for you? Are you in a good place where, some kids go to anywhere, and, not to pour scorn on a particular area in America. I don't want to say anything negative, but there are some states in America that are not designed for UK kids to go over there and live a happy, successful life, especially kids in London. Such a cultural change, but they'll be like, but it's the States. And I'm like, it is the States, but it's not what you dream the States to be. You're not in New York State, you're not in Florida, you're not in California, you're not in Illinois. It's not what you've dreamt of, but you want to be able to tell people I'm in the States. And that's I think that there's been a lot of kids that have made those mistakes, especially going to junior colleges and Division 3 schools or NAIA schools that they know nothing about. Because I always think that the dream for UK kids is that they think that they're going to be in the ACC, because that's what we see. Especially when I was a kid in the day of Pontel videotapes and cassette, literally, you thought that all of US basketball was like that, and it's not. You can't trust everybody that's over there, and I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but you're dealing with human beings, and sometimes, when you're dealing with human beings, it is, you're going to run up on a not so great person, and some people don't. Everyone thinks, I'm going to go to the States and I'm going to get a father figure or a mother figure, and it's just not always like that. And so you've got to be careful and do your due diligence and try and understand. And I spend time with our kids that go, looking into those things and talking about it. And one of the biggest things that people make a mistake is style of play. You have to watch the team play before you decide to go to that school. Do you fit their structure? Do you fit what they do? Does the university have the course that you want to study, or are you going to make an exception? And so I say to all of our kids, I need you to make a life decision, not a basketball decision. If you're making a basketball decision right now, it's the wrong decision. You need to make the decision that's best for your life. And ultimately, it's about to come away from the situation with a degree, with a blank canvas at 22, 23 years old for the rest of your life. And all of the sacrifice that people who get scholarships make, it takes, a hell of a lot of effort to get that far. Make the sacrifice now, get your education for free, don't have the student loan that, so many people have to pay back. And then if at 22, 23 years old, you want to go and travel the world or, do something or party, like a rock star for, 3 or 4 years. And then by the time you get to 26, 27, get into the workforce and get a career, then you can do that without this huge debt, and you'll have had the great life experience of playing in the States. And that's my vision for so many of our kids. That's why I want to be able to support them on that journey.
In terms of routes for players from the UK to become professional basketball players, the few that do you think we're close to being in a position where there are options in the UK that are better than what they could get in the States to help them achieve the goal of becoming a professional basketball player?
Depending on where you're picking and what the opportunity is in the States, yes. Like, I think that there's some really good setups here. Like I said, Denzel's over in Plymouth. Leicester Riders have got the connection with Loughborough. Can't think of any of the other ones now. Bristol, obviously connected with Bristol University, I think. And so you can get a great Russell Group level education here, or you can go to an NAIA school in Iowa and get a degree that's not really worth the paper that it's written on over here. And I say Iowa, but we've got a kid over there, you might have to edit that. But anyway, you can get a degree from somewhere in the States that it's not worth the paper that it's written on, and you can say you played basketball in the States. Or you can go to Bristol University and play for Andreas and get a degree at Bristol, and that is going to impact your life far more because such a reputable university. And so I do say to our kids, don't settle for anything when you go over there, because just because it's got basketball doesn't mean it's the right situation for you. But thankfully, the majority of our kids are in very good situations that they enjoy. We've had 1 or 2 kids transfer, as every program will have. Like, anyone who looks from the outside and says, the kids transferred. We've all got 1 or 2 kids that have gone to somewhere in the States and it hasn't panned out. And you're never going to know if you like something until you go and live it. And that's the harsh reality of it all, is that they have to go and experience it before they know. So
one of the most common questions that I get, via Instagram DM or in my email inbox every now and again will be a kid in the middle of nowhere, not really involved in basketball on a national level or any type of way, but wants to achieve that dream.
Yeah.
In fact, that was probably me when I was, 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them? If they're asking me, how can I get a scholarship to the States? What would you say?
I don't want to come across as an expert. I don't know, but my mind would tell me, in that situation with a young person, they're not connected to National League.
Yeah, they might be involved with National League, but not in any type of academy program. They're just kind of like, just not involved in any type of national team program. Just kind of, just a bit sort of on the outskirts of sort of national level basketball.
I would say not to force them towards an academy. I would say try and associate yourself with a club that's got experience of those things, because there are some clubs that are phenomenal that don't have academies at the moment. I'm not going to tell you that every academy is the only place. And I know, in the future it will probably go in the direction that most clubs will be connected to some kind of institution. But there are some really good clubs that have sent people on to places in the States. To try and associate yourself with one of those places that has experience of doing it before, or stay where you are, work as hard as you can, grind, get the best grades you can, and become a trailblazer in that program. And we had to have the first player that went from our program, and there's always going to be a first. So just it's all relative to the person. I would never say that there's an absolute blueprint for doing it. It just depends, because if you'd have said to the kids that started at Cola, how are you going to end up getting to the States? What's the route? I don't know. But they found their way, and they made progress. And I think that any kid can do it from any situation. It's just about the hard work and the sacrifice, I think.
Do you think there needs to be more centralised input from a federation level to advise kids and give kids guidance on, making the jump to the States or heading to Europe and stuff?
I think yes, to a degree, but I think there's bigger fish to fry at the moment, and I think that each individual institution or club kind of deals with those things. I think there should be a written document to support with the do's and don'ts, and some scouting services provide those things, and they provide support with those things, but maybe something to just provide to just give a little bit more insight. Sometimes I do speak to young people and their parents, and they're like, we've got no clue how it works. And I look at the kid and I'm like, you could absolutely get a scholarship if, you attack it and you approach it in the right way, but they don't know how the process works. And so yeah, it would be good if there was something in place for that by the federation, whether it be GB basketball or Basketball England or whatever. But I'm sure that's something that's in the kind of the pipeline and will be coming soon.
You said there's bigger fish to fry. What are the bigger fish to fry when we talk about basketball on a bigger scale across the UK? The issues that maybe it has, and the things that where's it improving or where it's not improving. If you're in charge, what are the things that you'd like to see to help improve and push the game forward?
I would like to see more support at the lower levels. Like, I think that, and I'm sure they're doing it. I don't want to say, that they're not doing it or whatever, but, we should start basketball at a younger age. There should be more local opportunities for kids to then go up and play, at the national level later on. One of the other coaches at the club showed me his nephew playing football, 2-on-2 football in Belgium. It's like 3.5, 4 years old. There was no goalkeeper. It's 2 against 2. And all they're doing is figuring out how to beat one player and kick the ball in the goal, because that ultimately, later on down the line is what you really need to do. We don't really have basketball at that level over here, and it's difficult, but I think that, we get caught up so top heavy, focusing on the top end, that if we start grassroots, build from there. I don't want to get into the Olympic legacy because I'm not educated enough to speak on it, but I found what we did from an Olympic standpoint quite disappointing. Even from team selection, if I'm honest, I think that there were some young English guys that could have got the nation behind them, and we didn't really go that route. And I won't go too much more into it because I'm not the type of person to be that involved in it, but I felt dispirited knowing that we had some young English guys that could have played, and we went the naturalized route and stuff like that. I really do think that those guys should have played. So building from younger, forcing. This is one of the things I would say, is that if you're an academy, and I know most academies are doing it now, there's a lot that have set up their own thing. If you're an academy and you're recruiting externally, you should be putting back into the pot as well in terms of providing players, or developing younger players, exactly, because you can't take all the time, and then those clubs are going to get dispirited. They're not going to want to continue to do it unless they're happy to send kids off at 16, 17. But if you've got your own pool of players, however many it is every year, 4 or 5, and then you recruit on top of that, then we're kind of not bleeding the other situations dry. You're adding and you're developing your own players to be able to add support. More players playing, the better the standard will be, the higher it will be. And I've got theories on different things. I've got theories on, what I think about national team and what I think about all of those things. And my focus with a lot of those things, I've spoken to people about doing the national team stuff before. If I do that, it takes away from my focus for what's really important to me, and what's really important to me are the kids that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And if I can focus on them and get them to where they need to be, then, that will always be my priority instead of spreading myself too thin. And I definitely don't coach for my own personal development. Coaching for me is far more about mentoring than it is about me proving that I'm smarter than the other guy on the sideline because I had a better ATO out of a timeout, and it was like, I got him. Like, I really don't care about all of that stuff.
I'm aware of time here, but the one thing I did want to touch upon, I think it was 2017, your sort of historic season with the girls.
Yeah.
So that year, correct me if I'm wrong, team was all under 19.
Yeah.
So you won Division 1 women's playoff and cup.
Yeah.
Did you win the league as well? And league?
We didn't win the
league.
The only thing we haven't won the league. We've come runner up 2 years in a row. We didn't ever win the league.
Okay. You won the WEABL title that year as well.
Yeah.
And you won the under 18 national title.
Yeah.
And cup title.
Yeah.
So it was a big year.
5. Yeah.
How do you reflect on that season and that group of girls? There was a lot of players that have obviously gone on to the States now and are doing great things.
I think as a coach, I was just very blessed to have a group buy-in, similar to the boys in 2010, but I was with those girls for 4 years, and we had so many mantras and hashtags. It was so cliche, it's unbelievable, but they put down personal agendas, and they were very talented. Like, we could never say that they're not extremely talented, but they put down their personal agendas, and we called that year the last ride, and Steve Veer was with me for the first 3 months of it, and we'd won under 18s the year before in Division 2 women, and I used to talk about daring to dream and stuff like that, and we've got next play mentality, something doesn't go our way, we move on. It's just loads of cliche stuff. Like, very seldom are these things that I create, but I think one of the things that I created that was so special in that team, it started the year before, but it kind of led on to that, was we used to have a mantra about being queen amongst queens, and it's weird because I'm almost a middle-aged man, or I guess I am a middle-aged man, but I gave them a talk about, I won't go into the whole story, but I gave them a talk about just how you view yourself, and are you a regular person, are you a queen, or would you challenge yourself to dare to be a queen amongst queen. The delivery was at the end of a practice. It was at the end of a pretty poor practice that, I felt like they needed something. It was a 20-minute talk. It was quite powerful. I think if you ask any of the people that coach for me, they always tell me, it's the delivery. Sometimes we finish practice and you give a talk, and some of the kids roll their eyes. I'm under no illusions, like, he's going to talk again. But sometimes you can just give them that thing, and the Queen Amongst Queens talk, I think, really changed how they viewed themselves, and they really, like, we would walk into gyms, it was only last year, it feels like an eternity ago, but we would walk into gyms, and whether it was Steve Veer that was with me, or Marvin Addy, or Coach Corte, I have to shout out Coach Corte, because we're here talking about culture, and we're talking about all of these things, and there is no Coach Jackson without Coach Corte. He's an absolutely phenomenal human being, one of the best people I've ever met, and he maybe doesn't get the same recognition, but if you ask all of the kids who's their favorite basketball coach is, they'll be like, it's Coach Corte, hands down. I'm like, hey, I took you guys somewhere, I did, but they'll say it's Coach Corte. They love the guy to pieces, and so do I. I think he's an incredible human being. But if you ask, them, those three guys about what would happen, they would say it only really takes 2 minutes of a game for those girls to finish the game. They just turn the screw. They decide we could struggle for 38 minutes, and they'll just decide to switch on and go and play it. And they were so close, it was hard to... They would squabble and they would bicker, but we would always have the mantra of, you don't have to be best friends, but you're sisters. And and they would really, really carry that. It would be so important for them along the journey, for them to kind of realize, I don't have to be best friends with this girl, but what I do have to do is respect her. She's my sister in basketball. And so they, you know, that experience for me is life-changing. I'll always look back on that. I love our kids, our current kids, in exactly the same way, but that one experience was, much like the boys in 2010, was a time where we got it so right, and they really, really bought in. And they were incredibly talented. Like, I think they made me look better as a coach than I really was, because they just did all the right things. And so, you know, it helped me. And so I won a Coach of the Year at Basketball in England, and we all went up. It wasn't my award, it was their award. They got it, we all went up, we all celebrated together. And I think that's one of the Southwark Pride / Cola things that I think, you know, embody what we do, is that it's a collective, it's a team before anything else.
Final question, the future. You know, looking ahead, sort of, I guess, longer term, you know, where do you see yourself? Where do you see Cola? You know, do you have BBL, WBBL aspirations? Kind of, yeah, where do you want the club to go to?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know how long I'll do it. I don't know how much longer I'll be in this situation. I'm getting older. I'm not old, but I'm getting older. My life priorities might change. And so it's a year-to-year thing for me. And a year-to-year thing based on when the kids come in. I'm not going to recruit a kid to a school and not intend to be there until they finish. But could I tell you that I'll still be doing it in 5 years? I don't know. I think I'll always come back to coaching. I think I'll always come back to mentoring in some way. But if I was to tell you, you know, I know absolutely, in an ideal world, I would like it to be an institute of sport with, you know, 10 coaches and 4 courts and, you know, the dream, the type of stuff that they have in other European countries. And if we could get there, that would be my dream come true. It'd be absolutely phenomenal. But for right now, it's year on year. It's just taking every day as it comes and focusing on the kids at hand, not getting too far ahead of ourselves and wanting to recruit every good kid that's out there, focusing on developing the ones that are with us, fighting the everyday battles with those kids to get them to, you know, achieve the goals that they say they want to achieve. And yeah, essentially, I have a saying that I use with my friends, very corny, but I have it, and I've had it for years. I heard it on I don't even know where I heard it many years ago, but it's I think if one thing that would encompass our situation and where I want Cola to be, it would be for our kids to say, for me to say to our kids, don't walk in front of me because I may not choose to follow, and don't walk behind me because I may not choose to lead. Instead, walk beside me and be my friend. And I think that that's important. And I'm not, when I say friend with the kids, it's not like that, but in terms of, let's just go on a journey, let's just experience it. There doesn't have to be a set model for how it works. And if they all take on that mantra and they kind of work that way, I think in 5 years' time, Cola could be a phenomenal thing. But with the dynamics of school, you never know what's going to happen. So, yeah, we'll see.
It's a perfect place to leave it. Jackson, thank you so much for coming here and joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I feel honoured to be here, so thank you so much.